Oh, hey guys. I just got out of that angry mob that Valve set up, you know, so we can fight each other for who gets this Steam controller. I think I punched a toddler out there. I don't know. Everything happened so fast. Whatever. Hey. Fuck that kid. That even was a kid. I got one. So I'm gonna use it for about a month and then I'll tell you how I feel about it. I've barely scratched the surface.
Wait, how long has it been? 3 years? Jesus Christ. So 3 years ago, I made a review on the original Steam controller, and I still use it 3 years later. It's definitely still an odd controller that's incredibly niche, but I still love it. It's kind of fallen off in actual usage for games, and it's how I actually prefer to navigate computers when I just lay back in bed or on the couch or something. Despite loving this thing, the lack of a second analog stick really held this thing back even for someone like me who liked it. Some games just don't lend themselves well to the way this controller is made. If you want to watch the original review in all of its 3-year-old quality glory or whatever, go ahead, but the quick and simple of this thing is, I love it, but it's limiting and feels cheap. The bumper buttons feel horrible and sound horrible, the back buttons are also the battery cover and it feels flimsy and weak. Putting the batteries in and taking them out feels like a last-minute addition, and in general, the amount of effort you need to put into making this controller functional is far more than what most people are willing to do. So I've always wanted a new Steam controller, and after the Steam Deck, the design was clear of what I'd want it to be like. And well, that's what we got. A lot of people just based on appearance think this thing is uncomfortable, but if I'm honest, I think it's the most comfortable controller I've ever held right next to the Xbox Series X controller. I'm a bit of a weirdo. I think out of all the modern console controllers, the Series X is my favorite because it's just improved upon the tried and true 360 and Xbox One controllers, and it's just made better. I'm one of the few people who actually really loves the D-pad too. It's my favorite D-pad on any controller. If I play Devil May Cry or a platformer or other things of the like that require precise inputs on the D-pad, I refuse to use any other controller. But when I was playing on PC, I typically would reach for my 8-bit DOE Ultimate controller. It's easy to set up, has a 2.4 GHz dongle, and has pretty decent battery life. It's an overall really good controller that got me through the past couple of years pretty reliably. The only problem I've really had with this controller is that the bumper buttons here would just stick and the analog sticks sometimes are not as accurate as I'd like them to be, but both of these are just small things, especially the bumpers. I just bought some lubricant and while the bumpers still aren't perfect, they don't stick anymore, so it's fine enough. All three of these controllers fill a specific place in my needs from different controllers. The original Steam controller is essentially whenever I'm playing something weird that just benefits from this weird control scheme. You know, things like casual shooters, games I can do gyro aiming with on top of trackpad aiming, or even weird things like the painting in Okami. It's such a weird niche that can only be filled by a controller like this. The painting in Okami is extremely slow and unsatisfying with an analog stick, but with this controller, when I paint, it switches to the mouse controls and I can just paint so much faster and easier. It is just my preferred way to play games like this. My Xbox controller is obviously an all-arounder, but I use it for specific games too. Games I want to use the D-pad in or simply just have no specific need for anything fancy. Just a good old controller. And my 8-bit DOE controller is just my marathon controller. It has a long battery life, does everything I need it to, and since it has Hall effect sticks, I never really have to worry about stick drift. So what does the new Steam controller have over all of these controllers? Well, kind of everything. It definitely doesn't have a great D-pad like the Xbox controller, but it sure as hell has everything else. But thankfully for the Xbox controller, I'd probably trust my life with that thing. So this video is mainly going to be me comparing the new Steam controller to the original and how this controller fares on its own, and if I think it's worth the 150 Canadian fun bucks Valve is selling this thing for. It obviously needs to be compared to an ordinary controller, but at the end of the day, this is a follow-up to the original, so it just makes sense to talk about that. I was one of the lucky few to get screwed over on day one trying to buy one of these things, but then getting lucky enough to get a chance to buy it a month later. So I've had the Steam controller for just over a month now, and I want this video to also serve as just looking at this thing as a controller. Sure, I'm also comparing it to the original, but 9 out of 10 people who buy this controller are not going to be using it to its fullest potential, and despite loving to tinker, I know I will never truly use this thing at 100%. To start things off, the original Steam controller is my horribly mangled and deformed child who was born with every disease. Sure, he's a failure, but he's my son, so I love him for what he brings to the world. A lot of effort on my part and heavy breathing. Sure, he's a fucking nuisance, but I know if I ever had to put him down, I'd immediately feel guilty and I would just miss him and the sound of the ventilator working to keep breathing all the time. But I can't lie, the new Steam controller is just the son I always wanted, who makes up for my first son's failures. I'm not afraid to say I picked favorites between my children. If one of your children becomes a crack addict, and the other person who cures cancer, it's a no-brainer. The original Steam controller, flaws and all, is the perfect piece of hardware if you just love to waste your time. With all the limitations it has, the sky was somehow still the limit on this thing. Extra back buttons, trackpads, a trackpad that doubles as a D-pad, and an analog stick that I'm surprised doesn't have any amount of drift. It's just surprising that they somehow made the sky not the limit on the new Steam controller, they put it into space. But the original Steam controller, this thing, as cheap as it feels, is seriously near indestructible. So what does it do right? Well, if you ask me, not a lot. The interesting thing about this controller is that, honestly, it kind of sucks ass. No second analog stick, the bumpers feel like they're gonna break at any moment, no dedicated D-pad, and on top of all that, half the time the basic config just doesn't work. But what it does right is that it can almost be anything you want using the Steam input settings. It might be a hassle, but once you get it working in a game, everything just clicks. You realize why some people really swear by this thing. But again, emphasis on some people. In most cases, it's just not worth the hassle to get this thing to a good place, so most of the time when I use it, I just set the right trackpad as a mouse, set up the gyro to activate on full trigger pull, and call it a day. That's another thing I like about this controller. It has that same thing that the GameCube controller does, where it's just a normal trigger pull, but when you get to the end, there's a little bump, so it kind of counts as a second button. Sadly, that's one of the things I wish that the new Steam controller brought over. It's not like a deal breaker or anything, but it's just something I kind of wish got standardized across controllers. That's pretty much it, though. The original Steam controller is an abomination on its own, but it's a very useful desktop navigation tool. And if you got spare time, you can make it into the perfect ultra niche controller for specific games. So when the Steam Deck came out with 2 trackpads, 2 analog sticks, and back buttons, me and everyone else on the planet who liked it said, I want that! Like that. I essentially wanted the opposite of what they did with the PS Portal. You know how they just slapped a screen between the DualSense controller and called it a day? Well, get rid of all this dog shit and boom, you got yourself the controller of my dreams. A controller that, on its own, functions almost completely out of the box without tinkering, and can also do everything niche that other controllers do. It does gyro, it does mouse controls, it does control swapping, it has a 35-hour battery life, and for 150 Canadian dollars, it better suck me off too, and oh boy, it kinda did. For the past month, this has been my main controller. I played through the entirety of Aliens Colonial Marines with this thing, played some Helldivers, tried it in some fighting games, platformers, and from a casual perspective, it sure is a controller that cost 150 fuckaroonies now, ain't it? Honestly, if you're just buying this as a controller with no in-depth tinkering, this thing is just not worth the money unless you specifically want a controller with a large battery life or something. But if you're someone like me who likes to tinker, even a little bit, I think you'll be like me and just end up with this as your favorite controller. This isn't going to be like a super in-depth review of everything you can do with this controller, but more so my favorite use cases. Obviously there's Okami. I swapped out playing Okami with the OG Steam controller with the new one, and it's just so much better. I much prefer the trackpads on these things, and while I wouldn't use this for fighting games over my fight stick, it's definitely a good enough controller that I can play on analog stick. Not D-pad though, the D-pad is too mushy and imprecise for that. Ever since I started playing Helldivers 2 though, since it launched, I've always been a mouse and keyboard player. I tried to play on the controller from time to time, but the D-pad inputs for the stratagems never felt right for me. When playing on a mouse and keyboard, you have 3 fingers already on the stratagem button, so you can easily do a dive, and with enough skill, you can input your stratagem even before you hit the ground. On controller, you technically don't even have to take your thumb off the analog stick and do some weird trickery to input it while moving, but it feels like controller doesn't get the same positives you have on mouse and keyboard. At the highest difficulties, this game can get pretty chaotic, and being able to input a stratagem in under 1 second can be the difference between life or death. But with the Steam controller, I set it up with action set layers. In normal gameplay, it's a normal controller with back buttons and gyro aim. Instead of tapping B twice to dive, I set the keyboard button, Alt, which is the dedicated dive button, to the back button. This makes controller already feel so much more responsive. But when I hold the left bumper to activate the stratagem menu, this swaps the back buttons into the D-pad, up, down, left, and right. This is recent, so I'm not on par with my mouse and keyboard gameplay, but look at how efficient that is. Hell, I don't even need to dive on controller. I can just keep normally moving. This opens up so many new opportunities and things for me to do in this game that aren't possible on any other controller or even on mouse and keyboard without serious compromise. And then I just let go of the stratagem menu button, and hey, I'm back to normal. There's even this weird feature with like the capacitive grip. When this was first revealed, I didn't really get why it would be useful. I installed Prey just to test the controller out. I was gonna restart this game. I never finished it, and I need to. And the Steam controller feels like a great game to play it with. But this game isn't a game that has actual aim down sights buttons. I don't pull a trigger to activate gyro. Some people just use capacitive touch on touchpads or the analog stick to activate gyro, but that always felt counterintuitive to me. But capacitive touch on the grips? This is perfect for me. Instead of having to take my finger off the stick or touchpad, I can just loosen my grip on the controller. Anytime you come into contact with an enemy and you need to aim, you just change your grip and boom, you activate a gyro. It's honestly genius.
So this has, without a doubt, become my favorite controller. And it's actually my preferred way to play a lot of video games now. I find myself even ditching mouse and keyboard sometimes, which seldom happens.
I'm not a mouse and keyboard purist by any means, but if I'm shooting in it, or have to do some sort of inventory management, or anything that just benefits not using analog sticks, I typically prefer to have mouse and keyboard. But with this controller, I truly feel like that barrier has been torn down. I'm one of those freaks who plays Grand Theft Auto and Red Dead Redemption with a mouse and keyboard, because I hate shooting in these games on controller. Sure, with other controllers like the DualSense or DualShock 4, they have gyro, but they don't have the trackpads, they don't have the back buttons. The only thing stopping this controller from being unstoppable is just bad support. Some games don't support simultaneous mouse and keyboard and controller inputs. Sometimes they do, but there's like a weird caveat like the HUD flickering between inputs, or the game only allowing one or the other to work at any given time. And that's the biggest caveat that this controller has now. Unlike its older brother though, I can still simply use it as a controller without having to use its trackpads as an analog stick. So, I honestly really don't care. I can either accept it and just use it as a controller with extra features, use Steam input to make it work, either through action layers or some other way to bypass the limitation, or just use the tried and true mouse and keyboard.
So, all in all, while this isn't the perfect controller, and it's really damn expensive, it's the perfect controller for me, an insane person who actually likes to tinker with things more than the actual game sometimes. The Steam Deck, as awesome as it is often held back by its own hardware. The thing's huge, it's a slab, and it doesn't have the best hardware. So often if you're trying to play a modern game or something, there's no point in using gyro or all these different systems. But having something that's just a controller and being able to use it on my main PC, it's a dream come true. This controller can meet its fullest potential in the hands of someone far more dedicated to it than I am, and then they can just share that work with the world. Honestly, it feels pretty great to spend an absurd amount of money on something and then just not have to do any of the work. I should start exploiting the labor of passionate people more often. You know what? Thanks, Valve. You've inspired me to become a billionaire. I'm a billionaire now. With all of my wealth, I'm finally able to afford a second Steam controller.